1 second. And you're live.
The chair calls to order this public hearing of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board. The time is 5:01 p.m. The date August 23rd, 2021 p.m. We will begin with agenda item 1A or 1B, Pledge of Allegiance. Vice President Sanowski, will you please read the will you please do the Pledge of Allegiance, and if other members present could please mute their mics.
Yes, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The board will now move to agenda item 1C, roll call. I'll do a roll call beginning with board member Hart-Wells.
Libby Hart-Wells.
Board member Beckman.
Present.
Vice President Sanowski.
Julie Sanowski.
And Jan Michael Greenberg. And just to check, is board member Lindsay here tonight? He is not. All 4 board members are present and there is a quorum. The board will now move to agenda item 1D, public hearing, second public hearing of the instructional time models for the 2021-2022 school year in accordance with House Bill 2862, pursuant to ARS Section 38-43102. Notice is hereby given to the members of the governing board and to the general public that the governing board will conduct a public hearing on Monday, August 23rd, 2021 at 5 p.m. The public hearing will be held virtually. Members of the public will not be permitted to attend this meeting in person, but will be able to view the public portions of this meeting online at the usual live stream site through YouTube. Dr. Menzel.
Thank you, President Greenberg, Vice President Sanowski, and members of the governing board. As you know, the House Bill 2862 requires having 2 public hearings before the board considers adopting the instructional time model. At the last public hearing, we received a lot of good questions from both governing board members as well as people who called in during that hearing. Tonight, Dr. Guerin and her team have prepared a presentation to address those questions, and they're available to take any additional questions that should surface after the presentation. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Guerin.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel. President Greenberg, Vice President Sanowski, governing board members, and guests. Tonight, we will present a quick summary overview of House Bill 2862 and the implications for SUSD, and then we will focus on questions that were received both from board members and from public speakers, and then we will take any other questions. So I'm going to turn it over first to Dr. Bachna for a quick overview.
Thank you, Dr. Guerin. So a brief review of the reason for this meeting. House Bill 2862 allows LEAs to adopt flexible instructional time models in how instructional time requirements are met. The plan allows for different modes of instruction, such as remote instruction, project-based learning, mastery-based learning, and evening work. In order to do this, a school district must receive approval from its governing board through at least 2 public hearings in order to adopt an instructional time model. Right now, when students are home under quarantine, they are marked as an excused absence, even if they are doing schoolwork at home while they are out. Upon adoption of the instructional time model, students would no longer be marked absent. Instead, they would be considered present so long as they are participating in distance learning. By continuing to provide educational services to students under these conditions, attendance requirements for school credit and funding will be met so long as the students participate. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Guerin.
So one of the questions we received related to students that receive special education services. So with the new additional support with tutoring, certainly students that receive special education services would receive the tutoring. In addition, we're working with our special education teachers, paras, and service providers to provide additional services during the time of quarantine or COVID-like illness. So as much as possible, we would, during the school day, meet in IEP minutes. So for example, a speech therapist could virtually meet with a student that is home in quarantine to provide the minutes for the speech services required in the IEP. Because there are more adults in a classroom, a teacher typically, and some support staff, teachers would be able to reach out to students during the school day to meet some of these minutes. We're already doing this now, and I really have to applaud our staff in the special education department for their dedication and creativity to making sure we're still supporting students receiving these services. Another question we received is how can we ensure internet and technology access for students who are home ill with a COVID-like illness, COVID, or in quarantine? And this is something that we've been navigating since the beginning of the pandemic. Each student is provided a Chromebook or a Surface Go to take home. We also provide hotspots to students who need internet access at home. So families just need to reach out to us and we can provide a device that will ensure that students have internet access at home. And we're not only doing this for students that are ill or in quarantine, we're also trying to bridge the digital divide for homework. So it is also for students that just need that resource when they're not in school. Our IT team is applying for reimbursement of this support through the Emergency Connectivity Fund, which is a federal grant designed to support this need. It has absolutely been a priority since the pandemic started, and IT has really risen to the occasion. When House Bill 2862 goes into effect, how long will it last? The House bill will go into effect after a governing board of a school district or an LEA holds 2 public hearings and approves the model. There is no expiration date at this time. How will we notify teachers? Well, we're notifying teachers and principals and parents in several ways. We had started with a stakeholder input meeting where we worked with the associations and with different teacher groups and had principals and 1 or 2 teachers from each building have an opportunity to join in to provide input in a virtual meeting. And we had option for the 13 phase 1 schools to just start this tutoring program before today. And so we have had a soft launch for schools that have had higher numbers of students in quarantine. We always use Teacher Talk, admin inbox, all the employee newsletters, and the Friday parent communication. So even though it's such a busy time, we're really asking all our staff and parents to prioritize this Friday communication. It was first in all employee communication on August 13th. We've had principal drop-in meetings and breakout sessions to roll out the tutoring models, both from teachers and with Varsity Tutors. And again, it was posted in Teacher Talk on August 20th. What is the cost of SUSD teacher tutoring versus the cost of Varsity tutoring? So for SUSD tutoring sessions, teachers will support students for 45 minutes with a 15-minute prep. Teachers are compensated at $30 an hour. With benefits calculated, the actual cost per hour is $36.22. So for 2 weeks of support for an elementary student, which is 6 sessions, the cost is about $217. 2 weeks of support for a high school student, which is up to 24 sessions, we're providing 3 sessions each in English language arts, math, social studies, and science. and it could be individual or more likely small group, depending on how many students are in quarantine. And that costs about $869. What the undefined cost is the cost of staff time to manage the project. We have instructional coaches that are partnering with each building to get this up and running and off the ground. Principals, administrators, business services, and office staff, all the requirements and documentation required to use grant money to support this. Timesheets, EPARs, all of the things logistically that goes through that. So that is undefined cost related to how much time we put into making this happen. What is the cost of Varsity Tutors? Varsity Tutors contracts with the district, and students should already be able to see a little Varsity Tutors icon on their student single sign-on through Clever. And everyone, whether they're getting Varsity Tutoring or not, has access to the platform, which provides study resources. Varsity Tutors matches teachers and tutors working with the parents to schedule the time. They make individual phone calls or email. You can also access tutoring on demand for the length of time and subject you want. 6 sessions for students in quarantine will cost approximately $360. So there are different costs and really different levels of engagement. What's nice about Varsity Tutors is it takes some of the logistics away from staff, because right now everyone is working an incredibly amount of time to manage learning, teaching and learning during the pandemic. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bachna.
Thank you. This model will allow for students to receive credit for a variety of instructional methods, including direct instruction, project-based learning, and independent work. All work together to contribute towards the instructional day. The tutoring opportunities you've heard about are part of this, as well as the various assignments that teachers provide and activities available to the students through Google Classroom. This model is not intended to be the primary mode of instruction for the entire school year. When students are in school in person, most attend in excess of the required instructional time for an academic year. How much time is allowed for remote learning under this House Bill 2862? Under this instructional model, students can spend up to 50% of the school year in flexible distance learning. This will be designated through a distance learning attendance code in the student information system. And with that, I'll turn it back to Dr. Guerin.
Do we have an idea of how teachers are using the tools? So we just sent out a Google form asking teachers when they are available to tutor, if they're going to be using Varsity Tutors, and also what tools they're using to meet the needs of students in quarantine. We just had a committee meeting with the ICS Teaching and Learning Subcommittee and talked about different ways that we could gather this data to find out what tools are being used. Are teachers using streaming? Are they using Screencastify? Are they using Nearpod? Are they meeting with students in the tutoring sessions? So many different tools that they could use. What is working? What do they need more support with? And how we can prioritize resources. So we talked about that with the committee on how to gather that data. So we will be doing that very soon. We want to be as responsive as possible to teachers' needs. And how are cameras being used to support students in quarantine? So cameras are one tool in the technology tool belt that we are using. Many teachers are using cameras to stream lessons, portions of lessons, or recording lessons. So for example, if I'm an algebra teacher, I could record my direct instruction, post it in Google Classroom. I would not be streaming necessarily every single class period. I would have the direct instruction in the Google Classroom, or I could decide to stream. There's many different ways to cover it. I could also pre-record direct instruction using Screencastify and post that to the Google Classroom. And students would see the problems, how they're worked through, and hear my voice as a part of the Screencastify. Feedback from last year does support challenges with students viewing content as passive learners, especially at the elementary level. So we learned rather quickly that, especially an elementary student, being a little box on the wall, watching learning happen, particularly with cooperative learning at the elementary level, was not as engaging as students needed it. And we found that creating a model where there was a teacher dedicated to students that were at home really worked. So this is a temporary absence, not an entire different learning model. So we're hoping that the small group tutoring or the varsity tutors will provide that really engaging support that students need directed to their learning needs instead of being a passive learner. There are benefits and challenges to both, of course. And we did hear loud and clear last year that stand and deliver, that lecture model is certainly not, does not meet the specific needs of every single class or the style of engagement for every teacher. So that is another challenge. The tutor model does provide the engaging direct instruction. We talk about requiring camera usage. This came up today in our subcommittee meeting. And we talked about different triggers of maybe a certain number of students in quarantine or certain subject levels or grade levels or certain periods of time that we could require streaming or use of other tools or recording a direct lesson. So we're definitely continuing to engage in this topic. We're also watching the number of students that are quarantined and hope the number is going to scale down with the mask mandate, with the both students, if they're wearing masks, if they're a close contact and they don't have any symptoms, they would not be required to quarantine. So that close contact quarantine could go way down. We're very hopeful on that, but we are closely monitoring the situation and we have absolutely learned to pivot. So we are having the discussions about camera usage and how to make that most beneficial to all. And how did House Bill 2862 impact our planning in supporting students in quarantine? So they were both happening in tandem. It was very apparent in the first couple of days of school that the students required to quarantine was going to be much greater than in the spring, greater than we anticipated. So we started talking about additional supports and we started talking about the tutoring model. Using ESSER dollars to provide these supports and having students be able to engage from home with this House bill allowed us to expand into different subject areas. We started out only in secondary with ELA and math and quickly expanded. We're hearing calls to expand into world language and other subjects right away. In addition, we started with 3 tutoring sessions per student and scaled that up into secondary to 12 because it would be counted as part of the instructional day. So that made some significant changes. So they were both being created separately, but then it became very clear that the House bill would enable us to ramp it up to another level and provide some additional significant support for students. And I think we are now ready to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Do any board members have any questions or comments? Vice President Sinasco, Board Member Beckman.
Yeah, thank you. Regarding the tutoring hours, can you describe, like on the sheet there, it says that they can have 24 at high school, 24 sessions with an SUSD teacher or 6 sessions with a varsity tutor. Is that correct? You can get, and can you toggle back and forth between the two, or do you have to pick one or the other?
So what we're doing is really promoting that our first choice is the SUSD teacher. When it is the teacher of record and they are planning the lessons, that's going to be the best model of delivery to provide support. But if a teacher is not able to do that or a designee is not able to do that, then we're providing the varsity tutor support. Now, it could be that For a secondary student, we have tutoring support for ELA. We have tutoring support for math. We have tutoring support for social studies. But we have a student reach out to us and said, I really need chemistry help. And the chemistry teacher or their designee is not able to provide support. So that is when it would become an and both. The reason the varsity tutor hours are less is because that is one-on-one, very specific to a student. The other hours are drop-in and could have multiple students in them depending on how many students are quarantined. And with varsity tutors, you can also do tutoring on demand. So if I had a couple questions in chemistry that I needed help with, I could click on demand, I need a chemistry tutor, and within 10 minutes, a tutor should pop up. And if I only needed to stay on for 20 minutes, I would still have 40 minutes of that 1 hour in the bank. So it's a bank of 6 hours. And I just want to be clear, we want to be very flexible if someone else needs more or something's not working for one student, or if a student is not well enough to take advantage of the service during the quarantine, we'll certainly provide it after, because then the student's going to need to catch up then. So we have to set some parameters on this, because we have to be able to stand it up, and we have to be able to afford it, and we have to be able to sustain it. But we'll definitely work with each family and student.
Okay, one more question, kind of jumping off of that. I don't know if this is available now, and if it's not, I would like to see it. As a parent, I imagine I'm getting that call, or my child being sent home, or whatever, they're quarantined, which sadly is happening. Do we have an informational sheet that goes home or is emailed to a child or their parents, student, that provides all of these resources and how to access them? Because this is not just a calm event. When this happens, we have parents working, frustration, kids. I have received many emails from parents or students saying that they really didn't know if they were supposed to be the ones contacting the teachers, they weren't hearing back. I would love to see something go out that kind of provides a play-by-play documentation of how these families can get the help that they need.
So that's excellent, Board Member Beckman. And what we've done is we have provided teachers letter A and letter B. So we've provided form letters. So once you get the notification from the nurse or the principal that your student has to quarantine, whoever the designee is that reports that is also reporting it to the teacher. So if I'm the English teacher, if I'm the third grade teacher, I'm going to know which students I have that are in quarantine. I then have 24 hours to send out a letter. Letter A is, this is how you can access all my resources. They are found in Google Classroom, and here is the link. And I will be providing tutoring at this time, and this time. Or my designee will be providing tutoring this time, and this time, and they will email your student the link with Teams. So it's a letter that they can individualize and then send out. So an elementary student would receive one letter. A secondary student would receive more than one letter, multiple letters, and it would be the 4 subject areas we discussed, though we're asking other teachers that they can also use it, just not include the additional tutoring, just that you can find resources, my teaching resources here, and this is how I'm going to meet your students' needs. So this is all getting rolled out this week. Today was launch day, so if a parent doesn't get that letter by tomorrow and their student was quarantined today, we are standing this up as quickly as we can. You can imagine the scale of it. Form letter B is, this is how you can access all the resources in Teams and Google Classrooms. This is how I'm using Screencastify, however they want to individualize it. And in addition, your student will receive 6 hours of varsity tutoring. Here is the link and the permission slip to access varsity tutoring, and then where to send it. So if that way we'll have a tight system of communication for parents.
Okay, with that, I think we're missing one piece, which is that 24-hour period. How are our parents going to know when their students get quarantined or they get sent home to expect within 24 hours letters from all the teachers. There's going to be a lot of emotions going on when that happens and frustration. So how are we communicating to those families that this is going to be happening within 24 hours? Because the emails that I'm receiving, these kids are going home and they're just sitting there and they don't know what to do. Should they email the teacher? Should they reach out to the principal? What should they do next? So how are we communicating that intermittent piece?
So we've mentioned the tutoring program in the Friday communication last Friday and the Friday before, and we will provide additional specificity because I don't know if we have the exact 24-hour language. We have that you will be hearing from your child's teacher, and 24 hours would be the longest. You know, we're really hoping that once we get this up and running, that they would hear faster, but understanding at the high school level and the number of students, and depending on how many students are quarantined, it could take up to that time. So I'll make sure we're very explicit in the communication, but we do keep mentioning it in the parent letters. But I absolutely understand that there's a lot of emotion around this, and that there were students that were quarantined that we did not have this additional supports in place for the additional tutoring. So it was just up to the teacher to reach out to the parent.
Okay, thank you.
Vice President Sanowski.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate the fact that all of these study resources are available to all students. So it doesn't take a quarantine situation for students to be able to access, whether it's to remediate or potentially to enrich their educational experience. Is that correct, Dr. Guerin, Dr. Bachna?
So there are study skill resources on Varsity Tutors. We're not scheduling the actual tutoring sessions for all students yet,
Right.
But it's interesting because we did offer Varsity Tutoring this summer as a support for students when we couldn't find enough teachers to tutor and we had a ton of programs going on and a ton of teachers working. But to fill in that gap, we did use this outside partnership. So we're starting to get more creative because we understand that one of our resources that is limited is our staff and their time. We are all working extraordinarily hard. And every time we add one more thing, which is critical, we want to absolutely provide support for students. But we also understand there's a finite amount of time and bandwidth that our staff has. So by partnering with outside organizations like this, we could expand it past quarantine to provide, because what we're finding is that when you ask people to come in person like we used to for tutoring, and sometimes you get families that take advantage of that and sometimes you don't. But when you have an appointment and all of a sudden the tutor shows up in your family room, we're seeing attendance rise on that. So we're going to learn some ways that we can expand this beyond the pandemic, certainly.
Thank you. You actually addressed one of my questions, and that was, could this potentially be used as per teacher recommendation for the students who exhibit a lag in their learning level presently? Maybe it was because of the past, or...
I can't wait till we get to that point. And to me, that point is going to be when we have less students in quarantine. We know what we've spent. We know what the cost has been, how many people have taken advantage of this, because we have to make sure not only that we have the bandwidth for it with our ESSER dollars. So once we have less students in quarantine and we're more focused on remediation of all students, not that we ever stop focusing on that, but this could be a way we pivot this resource.
Okay, and then you mentioned about the costs. So you said that it was $36.22, including benefits. Can you explain that a little bit further for me to help me understand that? Because isn't it like $50 per hour to use the tutor services, and then it's $36.22 per hour for our own teachers? Is that correct?
Yeah, so the Varsity Tutors runs anywhere from $50 to $60 per tutoring session, but The actual tutors, I believe, are paid around $20 an hour. I don't have an exact amount. The rest is for the platform and the scheduling and the content, and you can imagine all the costs associated with that. So it's not that the varsity tutors are getting paid more than our teachers. It's that the cost of all the stuff that we're doing, creating the Google Docs, the schedules, managing it, the timesheets, all of that is that undefined cost. We're putting for the varsity tutor portion with the coordination and the scheduling and the platform. Parents also receive, the tutoring is actually taped, and the parents receive a taped version of the session so students can watch it back to go over content that they need practice with. So it's all inclusive in the cost. But and then we are also very careful to use the ongoing rate for tutoring for our teachers, because we have it once this is over, we have to be able to fiscally afford it. And frankly, this is already going to be, if we have 12 hours per student that is in quarantine at secondary level, it's already going to be extremely costly.
Okay, I really appreciate your responses to that. I just want to make sure that if we are going to be spending the money, regardless of what direction or who it goes to, that maybe it would be enticing to a teacher to say, they can earn $50 an hour versus farming it out, so to speak, and paying overhead costs to a company that makes profit off this. Of course, it's their business, but that might encourage teachers, instead of going to their second or third job, work with their students and therefore cut out that potential, lack of communication, or on a positive note, more direct line to what the students are actually learning in the classroom, like their peers are. So I would like for us to consider that as an option if we're just not getting enough teachers from within our own district to help with that.
Thank you, Vice President Sanowski. I am very anxious to see how many teachers do sign up for this, because I know they're working so hard, and it is one more thing, even if they're compensated for it. So we'll keep that absolutely as a part of our discussion as we see, because the last thing we want to do is the varsity tutor, though it is a great service, is supposed to be the fallback.
Thank you both.
Board Member Hartwells.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Guerin. I had just a couple of questions. If we could just kind of go back at the top of your presentation, you opened with the special education component. I'll to be honest, I didn't exactly understand what the answer was there. Can we go back to that slide? Can you go through again with maybe an example, or I don't know if I'm just having trouble connecting with the kind of the response. And I believe this was a question that shook out of the public comments from the first hearing. So I think I'd like to understand the answer a little bit better, please.
Absolutely.
Better, thanks.
Yes, absolutely. This is such an important topic. So of course, any student with an individual education plan would receive the tutoring services. In addition to that, in many of our classrooms where students receive additional supports, there is more than one adult. There could be a co-teaching model, there's paraprofessionals, there's service providers providing services inside and outside of class, like physical therapists, occupational therapists, vision teachers, speech therapists. So what we're asking and what we're working with teachers to do is to look at a student's individual IEP when they are at home due to quarantine or COVID illness, and see what minutes they could conceivably still support while that student is at home during the school day. So for example, if I'm a speech teacher and I happen to see this student one-on-one, I can conceivably schedule that time with the parents and do it virtually like we did when everyone was virtual. This is a little harder for someone like a teacher that sees a group of students for speech therapy, or our occupational therapists are really stretched thin. So to carve out that time during the school day could be more difficult. In addition, if I'm a teacher and I have some para support with me, I could conceivably have a para go on and meet with that student. I design the lesson, I create the instruction, but a para could deliver that virtually for the student or students that are home during quarantine during the day, because there's more than one adult in the room. And again, there's a reason there's more than one adult in the room when that happens. So this could be challenging, but we're asking each team, each school, each classroom that supports students with individual education plans to look for ways to still provide that service during the school day with creativity. So those are just some examples. We also have a classroom of students that are virtual for a certain amount of time, and in a specialized program. And we are working right now, this minute, to flip that classroom so that the teacher is delivering the instruction for the whole class, because they're all at home. And so we're working on that fast and furiously right now, our special education leaders with that site. So creativity, dedication, and innovation is the key. We're certainly not going to be able to meet all the IEP minutes, but we're going to chip away at it and stay connected to our students at home.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful. As a follow-up, so if the tutoring is going to be provided, does Varsity Tutors have special education experience?
They have, and we would not count that as IEP minutes. I just, because that would be really hard to do that. But my understanding is they have tutors that specialize in meeting specific needs, including English language development, including some students that need specialized needs under their individual education plan, and they would communicate that with the parent. So that would be something where I have seen them to be very responsive to try to find out what students need.
And the assignment of tutors, can you talk about the logistics of that? Presumably then there is a cadre of special education tutors or tutors who are more proficient in that area. How is that information being communicated to the individual? You know, obviously the parents are going to have to be part of this. How is this information getting shared of who the tutors are on that roster, whether it's our SUSD tutors or our outsourced tutors? What is the logistics here? If I'm a parent,
I might have to see if Dr. Stoller-Slover or Ms. Bengola could answer that. I haven't quite gotten into that depth, but what I understand is that there's a form that parents fill out where you express the needs of the student. And off the top of my head, I can't remember the exact questions. But in addition, the tutor, the company will call and talk to parents and talk about a student's need. So we can, you know, this is our first launch. We can talk about adding some language for our special education educators in regards to that if they're using Varsity Tutors. But that would be separate from the IEP. So we'll have to see how in-depth we could get with that level of support.
Okay, and then along those same lines, if there's going to be, you know, these kind of disparate pieces of experience, what's the feedback loop that's been built to share lessons learned or things that are working kind of in near real time so that everybody can benefit and it's not just this informal, you know, that there's some infrastructure. What's the communication infrastructure that's been put in place for kind of feedback sharing so that all of our educators and staff can benefit and the student and the families?
So I'm going to pause for a second because I think we have Dr. Stoller-Slover here who could talk about picking of the teachers, specialized teachers, and then I'll answer that next question.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Lindsay, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Dr. Guerin, and hello, Dr. Hartwells. So the way that it works with Varsity Tutoring is that if a parent is interested in using Varsity Tutoring, they complete a form that's a permission slip that their student is able to participate. And that form goes to a Google spreadsheet, which collects the responses. And we have that shared with Varsity Tutoring so that they can see immediately any parent who signs up. And the nice thing about Varsity Tutoring is that we have a person who is dedicated just to SUSD, who, if we have an issue or we need to reach out, that person is able to help us right away. But going back to the process, the parent fills out the form. It tells them twice what to expect at the beginning and then when they complete the form. So it says, once you complete this, you will get a call from Varsity Tutors to help get you logged in and enrolled. And then from there, we'll help set you up with a tutor. And then again, when they complete the form, it's a reminder, this is what the next steps will be. I'm a parent myself, and that's the level of service I would hope to get if I had to set up tutoring for my own child. And then from there, once they get the list, Varsity Tutors does reach out to the parent, sets up their hours, and the family can log in anytime to Clever and see how many hours their student has left. Varsity Tutors is able to connect parents with different content areas and even some of the more challenge, like AP statistics, some of those really difficult classes, they're able to connect parents with tutors within 24 to 48 hours once they've had that initial phone call.
Great, thank you. Thank you, that was very helpful. Along those same lines, and this is kind of skipping or going perhaps a bit broader than special education specifically, but my understanding is that ESSER funds is to be used for this supplemental support. If that's the case, I'm hoping because that grant, federal dollars require as a condition of the grant, some outcomes. If you could speak to how the administration is planning to monitor the impact and effectiveness, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to the feedback loop because that's really important. So
that's this, right?
Okay, yeah, I mean, so I'll start with that nuance and then move on. So we knew that this was going to be a rather large endeavor, and we wanted that personal connection for sites. So we have asked our incredible instructional coaches to yet again take on another challenge, and they are pairing up with sites. So each instructional coach has 2 or 3 sites that they are building the tutoring with. So they're getting, and we had them, pick sites that they have connections with. I mean, not that they don't have connections with all sites, but, sometimes they've taught at that site and they know more people. SUSD is a family and it's a smaller family than we all think. So that personal support and connection is going to help us provide that instant feedback from teachers. I'm already getting really great questions that, oh, well, we didn't think of that. Let's figure that one out. So that's great. With Varsity Tutors, we asked for parent feedback this summer, made some phone calls, got some feedback that way, and so we felt pretty confident in the service. So we're going to have to send a survey to some of those families if we don't hear anecdotally, and we can work with Varsity Tutors on that. In addition, my teaching and learning committee just spent a long time on this topic right now. What's working? What's not working? How do we know? How can we be responsive? How can we be thinking 3 steps ahead? So if we're still in this situation next year, we have additional layers of support that won't be so dependent on each individual teacher. If we can build some consistency and supports district-wide, we have to be thinking about that right now if we want to have something new or different in January or next August. And I really hope we won't need it, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't start planning it now. So that's in regards to the feedback and trying to be responsive.
Thank you, Dr. Guerin, and thank you to your team.
Vice President Sanowski.
Yes. Dr. Guerin, what will happen if a family does not respond back to the letters that are sent home and they don't pursue any form of tutoring or assistance for their child. They just don't respond.
Sure. And we know that this is absolutely going to happen. We know that this happened when we had virtual learning models, and it will continue to happen. So this is additional support. It is not a requirement support. We're certainly going to ask teachers to keep reaching out. I know Varsity tutors will make multiple phone calls. They want you to use the hours, right? But what I think is important to know is that when a student does come back, then the teacher can still provide additional support, or we can still give them tutoring hours in a different way. So if they don't respond during the time, it might be that, you know, the family has so much going on, they could be ill, we don't know. And so all we know is that we can try. But when we come back, we're not going to say, oh, you didn't do it during quarantine, so you don't get anything extra. So we'll once again provide it. I just got an email today from a teacher saying, well, I want to tutor in person when the kid gets back because they're going to need more help. So how are we going to document that? So that's how we're navigating that, because we're using the virtual platform to take attendance and everything. So there'll be different layers. We're gonna try really hard not to say no.
I love that, because it might be that we didn't have the right communication or contact. So to not hear back doesn't mean they're not interested. Maybe they didn't understand, or they didn't get the message, or whatever. So I like that there's flexibility in this moving forward, even if it means when the child returns back to school, they can still have these opportunities. So I appreciate that. And I liked hearing that there were going to be attempts of phone calls, and it wasn't just going to be through the internet.
And I want to encourage any families that certainly teachers were working so hard to support the students in quarantine up to this point, but we're just launching this. And even a family today that gets the quarantine letter, we're still working through this. It's such a large scale project. So families can certainly reach out. And if their student was in quarantine and we were not able to provide this tutoring, we can give them 6 hours of the Varsity tutoring to just help them catch up in the meantime, since they didn't have that support when it first happened. This was such a large scale. So we just reach out, and we're going to try to make it work from where we are now.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any further questions or comments by board members? Dr. Guerin, I just have one question. How does our plan compare to plans that other districts have been putting out? It could be too early to tell, but just out of curiosity, you have worked in PVUSD as well, and I'm sure you have colleagues there. How does our plan stack up?
So I just attended Arizona School Administrators meeting, and they have a breakout session for educational services, and I attended that virtually today. And this was a topic of discussion, and certainly did not hear from every district in the room, but I'll tell you a couple things that I've heard. So I think a lot of districts are having teachers put the resources in the Google Classroom. Some of them have a more robust learning management system, like a Canvas or Canva, or I forget the name, but Dr. Bachman, you can help me with those names. I think there's two that are used most often. So that is one thing. What I've also found is I heard Deer Valley is a little tighter on what teachers are teaching at certain times. So we have a ton of resources for teachers to use, but they're able to get a little bit more prescriptive, and we have this online lesson, so algebra students can look at this now. So we have curriculum maps, we have pacing guides, absolutely, but we also provide teachers some flexibility that they're not on the same page on the same day. So if we can tighten up our curriculum maps a little tighter, that's something that we can systematize more than we have now. We've taken opportunities to do that. So that's an area that we can continue to innovate. I just heard from our neighboring district to the west that they're getting some tutoring up and running. soon. So that, I think that's just starting over there. So I've heard that. I have not heard district-wide just streaming for all the students in quarantine. That doesn't mean it's not happening. I just haven't heard that. Anything, Dr. Bachna, that I left out that you've heard?
No, that sounds about right. I think the learning management systems are Canvas and Blackboard. We've heard those brought up quite a bit.
Does that inform not just COVID-related measures, but also the type of platforms we may wish to, or type of organizational structure we may wish to pursue more generally moving down the road, so that students and parents and staff all have a one-stop shop for their course materials, homework, assignments, all of that? Is that being looked into on a long-term basis?
So it's something we certainly have talked about now that we're where we are. Some districts already had that. Some districts threw it together rather quickly. We felt that adding something that significant would be an incredible amount of stress on the system. So we have been using the systems we have, such as Google Classroom and Teams and Zoom, and providing some flexibility on that. But it is definitely something we can explore as right now we're using Synergy for our learning management system, but there is more out there that we could pursue.
Okay. Are there any more board member questions or comments, or Dr. Menzel, do you have any questions or comments? Good. The board will now move to agenda item 1E, public comments. The public will be provided with an opportunity to speak by telephone by calling 480-484-7873. Again, that number is 480-484-7873 to discuss the second public hearing of the instructional time models for the 2021-2022 school year in accordance with House Bill 2862. Our first speaker will be Jeff Stefan. Is Mr. Jeff Stefan or Stephen there?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen, you have 3 minutes to discuss the second public hearing of the instructional time models for the 2021-2022 school year in accordance with House Bill 2862.
Okay, thanks for having me. Hope you guys are all having a great evening. I wish we could do this in person rather than through YouTube, but hey, we got to do what we got to do. In Dr. Guerin's presentation, one thing she mentioned were there are hotspots available where students can take home to access the internet to do their lessons. That's a fantastic idea and resource. Her PowerPoint did not say how many the district has available. Let's say we have, thousands and thousands of students. Is each school going to get 50? Are they going to get 200, 1,000, 5,000? I would like to know how many, Wi-Fi hotspots are available. My children have internet access at our house, and they can, do a hotspot on their iPhones. So they're fine, but for those that are in need, how many are available? Are we going to run out? That was not discussed, so maybe you guys can talk about that in your subcommittee meetings. The next comment I wanted to make was also Dr. Guerin used the word, the district has the phrase, what's quote, technology tool belt for teachers with this online training, and that's a fancy word. But as a parent, I want to make sure that the teachers know how to use and maximize the technology tools within the tool belt. You could have, again, a fantastic teacher in person, but some teachers, and actually many, are clumsy when it comes to computer equipment and technology. My significant other is very clumsy when it comes to technology. It's hard for her to do a Zoom call. I'm always there to rescue her, but she's very gifted when it comes to empathy and oral speaking and mentoring others. But so I just want to make sure that if the district has all this federal money invested in technology, make sure that the teachers that do the online training know how to use the technology. You know what I mean? And then the other thing I wanted to add was it's an absolute disgrace that you guys are not holding board meetings in person. Let's get back to in-person meetings. The parents want to interact in person and not online. And I would just encourage the six of you to go back to in-person meetings. The other thing I wanted to add was one of my daughters goes to Cocopa, and she was out because of quarantine week last week due to close contact, and she was not given any online like work assignments, like nothing. So I just sent her to one of her close friends' house, and they had 4 or 5 shared teachers together for 6th grade. And I'm like, hey, figure out what your friend's doing, do those assignments, and we'll upload and scan them into the Google portal through Student View and get your stuff done. So anyways,
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Patricia Pellet. Is Patricia there?
It's Patricia.
Hi, Patricia. You have 3 minutes to discuss the second public hearing of the instructional time models for the 2021-2022 school year in accordance with House Bill 2862.
Hi, I have a 9-year-old with special needs, and virtual learning from experience in the past does not work for him, as I'm sure you honestly know if you'd admit it. Do you agree virtual learning doesn't work for some children? It leaves them disadvantaged. How will you better address this other than fluff, claiming virtual learning will meet his IEP?
Is that the end of your comment, Patricia?
Yes.
All right, Thank you very much. I believe since you've asked a question, I just want to make clear that under governing board policy, we aren't able to answer direct questions, but we can refer them, so they'll be discussed, answered tomorrow night when we approve this instructional time model. Okay, I believe that concludes our public comments for the evening. Under ARS section 38-431-01, section H, I would just like to refer the questions concerning technology, how many hotspots and computers we have available. I believe the answer is 1-to-1, but I just want to make sure that that's accurate, should that need exist, and the question of teacher professional development and staff professional development on the technology, use of technology, if that could be addressed tomorrow night. With that said, the board will now move to agenda item 2A, the adjournment of the public hearing. The chair moves to adjourn this public hearing of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board on August 23rd, 2021. The time is 5:59 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
Vice President Sanowski seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board adjourn this public hearing of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board on August 23rd, 2021 at 5:59 p.m. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say no. The motion carries 4-0 and the meeting is adjourned at 5:59 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you.